Good morning. How are you doing today? I'm Pastor Cindy, and it's Monday, which is a good way to start this week with a Bible story. I like to do Bible stories on Monday to start the day. And this week, our story takes place after Jesus has come and he has been crucified and died and resurrected. So it's an Easter story, but it happens even after that, when the first Christians, the first followers of Jesus, were living out the way that Jesus had told them. He had already ascended into heaven, and so now they were trying to figure out, what do we do next? What do we do next? And you may remember what happened, that they were in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, the Holy Spirit came down on them. And the Holy Spirit, it was like tongues of fire coming down on them. And it helped them to go out into the world and tell what they knew about Jesus. Good morning. It's good to see you. And so the disciples had experienced the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit told Philip, I need you to go to Samaria, because there are some people in Samaria that need to know about Jesus. This was a very strange thing for Philip to go to Samaria, to the people over there in Samaria, because well, they had a lot of fights in Jerusalem with the people in Samaria about what was in the Bible and what it meant to follow God and be God's people. And they had lots of arguments. And Philip, I guess he could have said, God, those people in Samaria just don't know about you and just don't know how to be your people. I shouldn't go talk to them. But instead, when Philip heard from the Holy Spirit that he was supposed to go to Samaria, he did. Oops, I've got Philip backward. So here he is, teaching the people in Samaria. I put one with a woman with a little child in it, because that was how Jesus taught. He taught to everybody, men and women and little children, no matter what, no matter who you were. He talked to them and told them about God's love. And so Philip heard that he was supposed to do that even in Samaria, where they just had the wrong Bible and just had the wrong ideas about God. And there he was in Samaria. And the Holy Spirit had something else Philip was supposed to do too. The Holy Spirit said, I need you to go to the road outside Jerusalem, because there's somebody there that needs to hear about me too. So there was Philip, and he had to go on that road outside of Jerusalem. And Philip went where the Spirit told him to go, And then a very strange thing happened, because out of Jerusalem, there was a man from Ethiopia who was traveling on the road, and he was riding in a chariot. Now, this horse is not a very stable horse, but we're just going to have to use our imaginations and pretend that he's carrying the chariot, even though he can't even stand up by himself. So he was a very rich man, so I'm putting a fancy coat on him, a very rich man, and he had been to Jerusalem. He was the treasurer for another country, which means he handled all the money in that other country, and there he was now. He'd been to Jerusalem, maybe for business or maybe for the holidays to learn more, but there he was coming out of Jerusalem. And Philip, the Holy Spirit told Philip, you need to go alongside that man in the chariot, that Ethiopian in the chariot. I wonder what Philip thought about that, trying to walk along somebody who was in a chariot with a horse pulling them. I wonder if he had to run to keep up. Do you think he had to run to keep up with the chariot? But there he was, walking along, and he saw the Ethiopian in the chariot, and he saw that the Ethiopian was reading a scroll. And it was part of the Bible. It was the part of the Bible in the Old Testament that talked about one day there would be a lamb. One day there would be a lamb, and it would be like a lamb that goes to the slaughter and never cries out, never complains. And there's that Ethiopian on the chariot reading about the lamb. And Philip says, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And the Ethiopian said, "How can I understand anything like this unless somebody explains it to me?" And Philip said, "Well, I can explain it to you." And the Ethiopian said, "Well, okay, get up here in the chariot with me." And so Philip got in the chariot up there, and as they rode along, Philip explained to the Ethiopian about the lamb in the Bible, that it wasn't an animal, that Jesus was like a lamb, and that Jesus had died on the cross just like a lamb sometimes has to die for others, but that when Jesus died, he was resurrected. That lamb hadn't cried out and hadn't complained, but had said, "Father, forgive them." It was like all the sins of the world were on him, and the lamb was showing that God's love was for everyone, no matter what. Well, as they're riding along, they looked down, and there beside the road was some water. And the Ethiopian says, "Well, what's to stop me from being baptized?" And Philip said, Nothing. You can be baptized too." And so they went over to the water, the Ethiopian and Philip, and they got in the water. And Philip baptized him. He took some of that water and put him right on top of the Ethiopian. I don't think it was a lot of water there since it was in the middle of the desert and the wilderness, but there they were in the water, and the Ethiopian was baptized. What an amazing story. What an amazing story. He heard about God's love and believed that God's love was for him too. And when they came out of the water, Philip was gone. And the Ethiopian, I bet he wondered, what happened to Philip? But it turned out there were some more people that needed to know about God's love. And so God sent Philip to another place too. So I imagine the Ethiopian got back on his chariot, and he kept on riding all the way back to where he was the treasurer for the queen, all the way back. And I bet he told the queen and everybody else in Ethiopia about how God loved them too. This was such an amazing story, because you see, when the Ethiopian had been in Jerusalem, he wasn't allowed to go into the temple in God's house. And he was told he wasn't good enough to go in the temple and worship God there. And yet Philip knew that God's love was for the Ethiopian too. It seemed like God's love was for everyone. It was for the Samaritans who didn't have the right Bible and argued about what God was like. It was for the Ethiopian who thought he wasn't good enough to even go in the temple, and yet, what was to stop him from being baptized? Nothing. God loved even him. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful story. Well, you know what we do whenever we read Bible stories and tell Bible stories, we always do two things. And the first thing is we ask I wonder questions. I wonder, what was your favorite part of this story? I wonder if Philip had to run fast to keep up with the chariot when he was going along. I wonder what Philip thought when the Holy Spirit told him, "You need to go tell about me to the Samaritans, and you need to go tell about me to the Ethiopian." I wonder what he thought was going on next. I wonder if there's ever been a story in the Bible that confused you. The Ethiopian didn't understand what he was reading. I wonder if there's ever been a story in the Bible you didn't understand. And I wonder, has there been somebody who helped you to understand the Bible better, who helped you to hear the story about God and God's love? I remember my Sunday school teacher teaching me the stories about Jesus, and I remember my grandmother teaching me stories about Jesus and helping me to know that God loved me too. I wonder who's helped you to know about Jesus. And I wonder who you're going to help. I wonder who you will help know about the love of God and who you will tell that God's love is for them too. It's not just for certain people, but it's for Samaritans and Ethiopians and for everybody. For everybody. That's a lot of I wonder questions, isn't it? So that's the first thing we always do. We always ask I wonder questions and think about the story. And the second thing we always do, we always tell the story ourselves. How are you going to tell this story of an Ethiopian? I had to use a horse that was kind of wobbly, and I made some paper wheels and put them on a box to make a chariot. And I had to use my imagination. Maybe you could use Lego people to tell the story. Or maybe you could use dolls, some stuffed animals to tell the story. Or maybe you could draw the story and tell the story that way. How will you tell the story today? It's so important for us to tell those stories because that's how we figure out the I wonder questions. We tell the story and we wonder even more. And that's how we learn more and more about how God's love is here and now today. I hope you like the story. And I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. I got another story for you too. Not a Bible story, but a story about Mr. Thad I want to tell you. Somebody else who's a real person, and I'm looking forward to telling you that story. I'm thankful for you. I'm glad to be your pastor, and I hope you have a great day today. Bye.